so to strengthen its competitiveness as well as its capacity to mitigate the negative impacts of new supply-side shocks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me the panelists of this first panel, which are Vincent van Petegem, who is the Minister of Finance from Belgium, Andrzej Domański, Minister of Finance from Poland, Ms. Mairead McGuinness, the European Commissioner for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets, Mr. Pierre Gramegna, who is the Managing Director of the European Stability Mechanism, and last but not least, Ms. Gelsomina Villiotti, who is the Vice President of the European Investment Bank. And we will have the pleasure now to listen to Ms. Villiotti, who will set the scene of our first panel, who is on a European policy agenda for unavoidable challenges.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm very happy to start this panel. And actually, many of the words that I have in my speech have already been evoked, so I think that is just, remember, we talked about, the President talked about elections. It's important election worldwide, the election in Europe. There was a lot of talking about autonomy, strategic autonomy, and there was talking about climate challenges. There were talking about competitiveness. And actually, we know these are all major challenges, but also opportunities. Opportunities because, to increase and enhance the competitiveness in Europe, we have to build on these challenges. And the task is not easy since, it's Europe and the European countries are coming out from multiple crises over the past years. The fiscal capacity of many countries has been challenged. Europe was able to put in action important common projects like the RRF, and the EIB put there its contribution. But this is not enough. We need to do more, and we need to be creative. Actually, I think that this is the right moment, also the political right moment, to think about what is needed in the future, since we will have a new Commission. We will have a new MFF, which will provide the resources for the priorities which will be chosen as the priorities for the European Union. It's an important element where the EIB can provide, its contribution is investment. We know that investment are the engine of growth. We know that public investment are important, but we also know that, and ministers know better than me, that sometimes it's easier to cut the public investment because there aren't many constituencies behind public investment, and so sometimes, and we have seen in the past that public investment have been reduced. So what is important is to keep resources devoted for investment, and more importantly, what we need to do is mobilize private financing, since we know that public resources are not sufficient. And in that, it's in the DNA of the European Investment Bank is that to mobilize resources. You know that we never finance 100% of the project. We finance between the 50% the 75%. And what is important is that our presence there, it's a sort of, it's a mark of quality which attract investors. And this is an important role that we can play in attracting private financing, in pushing the European policies, because actually we are policy taker, we are the financial arm of the European Union. And actually, I think that also if we look over the years, we have been one of the most successful common projects at the European Union, where countries put together resources, they capitalized on these resources, they leverage on these resources. And this is what we want to continue to do under the guidance, also, obviously, of our policy masters. And there are many things to be done, and the Prime Minister, Frieden, I think that he mentioned, it's the relevance of regulation, and how sometimes it can be an overburden for companies, for the business. But also regulation is important also to drive investors, because I mean what investors need is also stability, is also, they can rely on a framework of rules which allow them to invest so that they can expect the right return on that. So in this sense, I think that we expect also very good regulation. The Capital Market Union and the Banking Union has been evoked as a very relevant pieces. And actually here the EIB also can play a role, an important role as a player. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Under the guidance of some European countries, there was the launch of the European Tech Champions Initiative. Actually, we know that in Europe there is a lot of flourishing of startup, very good idea that can also rely on private financing. But when they arrive at the scale-up level, there aren't enough sufficient capital to allow the flourishing of these startup, and many times they are, kept away from investors from outside Europe. So there was this initiative, the European Tech Champion Initiative, which is an initiative led by the European Investment Fund, which actually is that to promote big and great champions at the European level. And that I think that promoting on the Capital Market Union, providing more ability of access of the savings to the financing business, it will be relevant. But this is not only for big investment, it also will be for small investment. We have the example of the European Innovation Council, very relevant initiative that at the EIB we run to support, it's the very creative idea that with the financing of the Commission and with the support of the EIB can flourish. So these are just a couple of examples where we can contribute also to the completion of some important European initiative. So we rely very much on this debate that you are going to have now to have ideas on what we can do to cope with the challenge that we have ahead and how we can work together along as the partnership line which have been evoked by others this day. So thank you very much.
Gentleman Abiliotti, for this excellent introduction and for having also raised the right questions. And my first one would go to you, Vincent van Petegem. The Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union is just 1 month old. Minister, can you share with us the priorities of your presidency regarding the challenges lying ahead for Europe, notably how to strengthen the EU industrial competitiveness and also how to foster a just energy transition?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here, also as president of the board of governors of the EIB, and I'm also very happy to see Werner here today, and of course Nadia and the other excellencies. Very good that we are here together, because of course Europe is facing a lot of challenges. They were already mentioned, amongst others, by the Prime Minister, indicating the challenge on defense, the challenges on green transition, digital transition, and so on. And as ministers of finance, we are looking how are we going to finance all of that. That is our main goal, and we need to think about all these challenges that we see and all the challenges that European citizens are seeing, and they are looking not always to their national government, but also to Europe to solve these kind of questions. The question is then, how are we going to solve it, and how are we going to finance these issues? I see there actually two main, and that's also where we are currently working on in our presidency, two main parts. The first one, and it's always coming back to the private-public partnerships that we're always mentioning if we also talk about the EIB. First one, public. Important for us is of course that we invest ourselves as governments. There, for example, we are now putting a lot of effort, putting a lot of energy in finalizing the economic governance review, the budgetary framework that is necessary. We also need to move forward with that. We know that in that new framework, investments are incentivized. We need to look if there is enough room for investment to do so. Of course, always in a good balance with also going to sustainable debt levels, but also looking how can reforms and investments can be incentivized for the member states. At the same time, during our presidency, we will also have an evaluation of the recovery fund, the RRF, the Next Generation EU. That discussion and that evaluation will definitely trigger the question, what will we do in the future? It's also already mentioned a little bit by Luc, saying, yeah, now I'm a little bit more looking to Eurobonds and other things to finance the challenges that we see in the future. But that is a discussion that we will definitely have once we start the evaluation of the Next Generation 1.0. We will have discussions where to go to. And there, I think it will be important that if we go to a similar financial instrument, that we also think a little bit more in a European way, a pan-national, a transnational way, looking to projects that are not only focused on the national level, but also to the European level. Transportation, mentioned by Charles. Energy, that will also be definitely one of the challenges that we face. The defense, which is also important. So I think there as well, at the public level, we need to look what's ahead of us. And then, of course, the role of the EIB, and I maybe already make a small jump to the private part. According to me, and the initiative is actually mentioned as one of the examples, for me it's important that the EIB puts its quality stamp on investments, on public investments. And by doing and giving that quality stamp, private investors will be motivated to invest as well. We have seen it in the European Tech Champion Initiative. That's a clear example where we actually say, okay, we are going to put the quality stamp on some not startup, scale-ups, and that will probably also trigger other investors to actually also do the investments in this kind of companies that will help our competitiveness, etc., etc. The other side, private side, we as Europe also, of course, will have to play an important role there. It's about the banking union. Stable banks are important. Stable financing is important. We know that we still have to do work over there. The same with the capital markets union there as well. We're talking about a single market. We're talking about integration. But also at that point, we need to look if we can make steps forward. On the capital markets union, we're really looking how we can improve that and if we can come to some conclusions on a general approach in the near future. On banking union, there are already some files that are now finished. I call them the low-hanging fruit, but we know that there also some important work needs to be done to actually also stimulate their private investments.
Yeah, thank you. Maureen McGuinness, filling the major investment gaps for energy and digital transition will require mobilizing huge amount of private capital, notably through the financial markets and the provision of the right incentives to institutional investors. What would you consider as the key levers to further deepen the capital markets union and also the banking union?
I'll give a tabloid answer to that. More speed, less resistant, and a bit more honesty. Because really, I think the time is now to deepen our capital markets union. I have made the observation that in all of my time running for elections before in the Commission, I never met a citizen, or indeed business, who said, how is capital markets union going, or banking union? But they would ask, why can't I borrow money in the single market? And one of the things I'd like us to stop doing is talking about cross-border, because we have a single market for 30 years. And we have both an opportunity and a challenge when it comes to money and capital. We have a chance to build strong capital markets union. So I was up until 4 in the morning. Please don't look too closely. And it's an example of how we were trying to work on European market infrastructure. to strengthen our open strategic autonomy. And I really enjoyed, Prime Minister, your very clear remarks on many topics. And being up at 4 in the morning is great, and we got a result. But I will also say it's not enough. So how we actually evolve needs to speed up. I don't want a crisis to make us speed up, because we're very good in a crisis. Europe is amazing what it can do when it has to do it. But I do think that we are now at a time where we have a listing act, we have a European single access point, we have worked on market infrastructure, we've many warm words on capital markets union, and we have a lot of instruments in place now. And, you know, for me, warm words are cold comfort if we don't actually believe in what we're saying and don't believe that we can take these steps forward. And the urgency is really, really severe, because it was addressed earlier, our good startups, our innovators are going to the US for scale up. Many companies, old companies, established companies in Europe are also delisting. So I think we have to ask ourselves very fundamental questions, and it's easier for me in the Commission to do this, and maybe even as a Member of Parliament previously, because I think the main issue is in the Council for the Member States, because clearly there are issues that are difficult in a national context. How do we get beyond the national context and view the potential of capital markets union and banking union to unlock the private investment that we so urgently need, when we know that our prime ministers cannot dig into a public purse all the time? It's not bottomless. So we need private investors. Why is it that our retail investors, we're great savers in Europe, so we have lots of money on deposit and it's not earning anything? We don't have a culture. So I talk about financial literacy as well as all of the other instruments that are there. But I will warn that, you know, if we do many pieces of legislation without strong political will, that will not be enough. So the Commission can do all the heavy lifting with the co-legislators, but there comes a point where we have to be very serious and put a timeline in place. That does require us asking questions like, do we need exchanges in every place, in every moment? I mean, these are difficult questions, but I think we have to ask them. Maybe an observation in terms of the title both of the opening session, which I think was excellent. I worry a little that we might change the wording. It struck me as we were listening that the real danger is if we have European polarization in a more competitive world. And therefore, I think the need for us to pull together in a time of great challenge is urgent. And again, we know that there are hesitancies now around what we do around climate. We should never allow that competitiveness and sustainability are opposed to one another. In fact, without sustainability, we cannot be competitive. There are costs in between. There are obviously things we can do around regulation. My last remark, I think if energy was very cheap, we wouldn't be talking about competitiveness. So I think if we could really tackle energy, energy, including unrealistic delays in planning permissions. I mean, there are lots of issues that we all face in our member states that need to be unlocked. So the time is now, and the time is right.
Talking about tackling our energy needs in Poland, Andrzej Domański, the new government has been in place for just 2 months, facing major investment challenges, notably for the transformation of the energy sector while preserving the cohesiveness and also the sustainability of public finance. What are the challenges and also the investment priorities your government is now focusing on, and what are you expecting from the EU, notably through the recovery plan?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really great to be here. Of course, we are facing plenty of challenges. I believe that one by one we will manage to deal with them. Our investment priorities are pretty clear: education, green energy, transition, and defense. So let me give you a couple of words about each of them. One of the first decisions of Donald Tusk's new government, as you mentioned, we are only 8 weeks, was to substantially increase the investment in education. We increased the spending by 0.8 of GDP. So it's really massive. But from the experience of, for example, Nordic countries, we know that investment in education pays off. We'll, of course, have to wait, not a quarter, maybe not a year, but it will pay off at the end. Another very important area is, of course, green energy transition. Currently, nearly 70% of energy of Poland is generated out of coal. 7-0. So it's absolutely unsustainable. It's a huge burden, not only for the climate, but for our economy as well. There are weeks when, on the spot market, energy price in Poland is 50% higher than in Germany or France. So you can imagine what a burden for Polish industry it is. So this is why we have to invest heavily in the green energy transition. Of course, there's a EU funds for that, and government will participate. But all foreign investors are of course more than welcome to take this opportunity. I say opportunity because we do believe that it's a great chance. Our economy is set to grow about 3% this year and then accelerate in 2025. So economic environment is pretty good, and the investment has to be, but we of course have to make more and maybe a bit more rapid decisions. We'll invest. We see a lot of potential, of course, in wind, solar, but also in nuclear energy. So that's pretty important, and the government has already made this as a priority. And last but not least, of course, defense. A lot has been already said during this meeting about defense. I just like to give you another number. This year, Poland will spend 4.1% of our GDP on defense. 4.1. So you can compare it to the EU average, and this is a huge burden. We are doing it because there is a reason for that, and the reason is growing. We see the threat coming from east. We see what's happening in Ukraine, and we do believe that Europe needs to get ready. There are more challenges ahead of us. Ms. Calvino was pointing for elections that are taking place this year. We know that there will be election in the United States, and the geopolitical risk are, in my opinion, in opinion of Polish government, growing. So what we need is more European solidarity in terms of defense, and we need to invest heavily in European defense industry. So these are the three main areas: education, green energy transition, and defense.
Thank you for this. Pierre Gramegna, the EU has been impacted by different supply side of shocks, recently putting at risk our competitiveness and also favoring national responses. Do you believe the EU economy is well equipped to ensure its resilience in the new global environment? And would you recommend to complete the existing toolbox of EU financing tools and instruments?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Pleased to be back in this room, and congratulations to Nadia Calvino and dear Werner for what you have achieved with your team in 12 years. You've put the EIB definitely on the map, and I think everybody is proud of it. So we're all here, and I will start by 2 comments before then developing quickly 3 points. My first comment is, never has a European Parliament election been as important as this one. It's going to happen in 4 months. And in the past, and I remember the first election back 45 years ago in 1979, I mean, it didn't catch the general interest, although it was the first time it was elected directly. So let's realize that it is becoming important, because all parties in all our countries are telling us that this is a decisive parliamentary election at European level. This is a novum. And why is it? Well, it's because Europe matters. It's because Europe has proven that it can deliver. And I really think that all the non-skeptics on Europe should use this campaign to tell what has been achieved. Now, we spend a lot of time, and it's normal and it's good, to say what we want to do in the future, what we want to do more in the future. This is part of an election. But an election is also to motivate people to vote in favor of the project by telling them what has been done. So as Mairead rightly said, we are very good in Europe to deliver in case of crisis. We're not so good in quiet times. Now, we're not in quiet times at all. But still, and I'll come back to, it's not quiet times. So let's really focus on what we have achieved. Let's be inspired, like Luc Frieden rightly said, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, the Robert Schuman spirit. Robert Schuman was born less than a kilometer away from here. His native home is down the hill there. It's a library, you can visit it. And he always said it's a peace project. And Luc Frieden was right to underline that, and I was glad that Charles Michel devoted a lot of his presentation to the defense issue, and that is exactly the first point I would like to dwell on, is security and defense issue. You might say, what does that have to do with the ESM? Well, the ESM, European Stability Mechanism, headquartered also not far from here on Kirchberg, is there to help countries that are losing support to financial markets. We've done that for 5 countries in the last decade. But we're also there to prevent financial crisis. And to do that, we are analyzing where are the risks. And I can tell you, the biggest risk by far is the geopolitical and military and defense risks. That is like a Damocles sword above our head, because of the unacceptable aggression of Russia against Ukraine. Now, we see that as ESM as the biggest risk. We're not the only ones. In Marrakesh at the IMF, it was the #1 worry. I was in Abu Dhabi the last 3 days. It is the main worry. I think it's all in the back of our heads, and Andrzej highlighted this obviously, as your country is very close. When you ring the alarm bell that we have to spend 4%, or you do spend 4% head off, I tell you, that's what many countries have to do, is to get closer to the 2% target, because otherwise our defense and security is not guaranteed and certainly not credible. So, and if our defense is not credible, the financial risks that are attached to that are extremely high. So this is my very first point. Let's not only not underestimate it, let's put this on the map also for the European Parliament election. And it's good news that Europe has agreed to 50 billion additional help to Ukraine. I mean, if you had asked me before the invasion of Russia if Europe would ever be able to mobilize money for such issues, I would have told you you're a dreamer, but we have done it. My second point is more closely to your question, but again, the risks anticipation is key for us at the ESM, is banking union. Here again, we keep on saying what we have not done yet, but we have done a lot. And we had a real-life stress test less than a year ago in March with financial turbulences in the United States and in Switzerland because of one specific bank. Now, Europe was not impacted by these financial turbulences. Now, because it did not happen, well, we don't talk a lot about it. Well, it did not happen because we have a great resilience of our banks, because we have a framework, because we have single supervision mechanism, because there's so many reasons, because we did so much. Now, For example, the European Stability Mechanism has put into place a backstop for the Single Resolution Fund of banks, backstop and Single Resolution Fund, which is nurtured by contributions of the private sector, so that we can avoid in case of failings of banks, it is the taxpayer who pays, but it is the sector itself. Great achievement. No one in the world has that. So what I want to say, yes, we could do more. We could have a European mutualized system of deposits, which we are still working on. But it's not because we don't have done that last step that our system is not resilient. So again, communicate on what has been achieved also in the campaign. And my third point is more large, but is key, is competitiveness. Now, it has been highlighted by all speakers, in particular also by the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. If we are not competitive, we will lose ground as EU. It's as simple as that. And how can we ensure competitiveness? Well, the competitiveness is ensured first and foremost by the private sector, and by companies and business. So we must not make their life too difficult or impossible. Second, we have the success story of the single market. Here again, I would encourage to use a different word than the one Charles Michel has used when he said we need to complete the single market. It's not about completing the single market. We have achieved the single market 30 years ago. It's just we need to modernize it and update it. The example of digital paper, digital versus paper, is a question that in 1993 did not exist. So it's not that we have not delivered. It's that we need to take into account that the economy is changing, and the answer can only be European. Let me finish by insisting on the EGR, Economic Governance Review. That means the new Stability and Growth Pact. The EU countries, and as ESM, I sit around the table, has agreed to new rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, which again, many thought would not be possible. And the greatest achievement of all in that is that we have drawn the lessons of the past, that financial stability is important, sound public finances are key, but that should not happen to the detriment of public investment. We have underinvested in the European Union over the last 10 to 15 years, so we are aware of that. So more public investment will trigger more private investment, and we have the ideal tool in the world to crowd in private sector investment through the EIB that everyone in the world envies us. So I think we have a lot of tools in place, but I would like to finish with a note of caution. To get to make our economies more competitive and more productive is not easy. And some of you might remember the Lisbon Agenda of 2007. Remember what that was about? Making us more competitive. We have not really delivered on it, but it's not only politicians and international financial institutions that have to deliver this or help deliver this. It's national authorities together with the EU, the Commission as such, who have to be reasonable. I think lots of ideas on the table. Deregulation is certainly warranted without giving up the challenges of climate change, because if we go back on that or retrieve on that, we shoot ourselves in the foot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The importance of the upcoming European elections has been stressed by almost every speaker today. Mr. van Pietegem, the Belgian presidency has a particular role to play in those elections. How does Belgium see its role ahead of these elections, and what ambitions are you willing to imprint with the aim of strengthening the EU's strategic autonomy?
Well, first I would to come back on what Pierre said, and I think that's right. If we talk about the elections, we sometimes does not talk enough about what all the good things that we do. And what I feel a lot is that politicians are using Europe to blame if something goes wrong at the national level. And that is, I think, not the way forward. We are Europe. We are actually making the regulations. We are looking how we can invest, how we can focus on the challenges we face. And that's also something that will be important during the elections, to tell to citizens, we are Europe, we are making Europe, and we are making the future of Europe. Now, our presidency, of course, is a special one due to that, to these elections, the 9th of June. So during the first part, we are focusing on what Mayred did last night, finalizing the trilogues on different files. Also the one on the economic governance review, the new Stability and Growth Pact, an important one. That is the work that we are doing now. But then, of course, we need to look on what's coming next. What will be the program of the next European Commission? How are we going to make Europe in the next legislation or in the next term? So that will be something very, very important to weigh on. And if you listen around well, not the table, but here on the podium, and if you listen to the speeches that were given before, it is all about competitiveness. We are really looking and putting a lot of focus on that competitiveness in different ways. Last mandate of the European Commission, we had the Green Deal. I think that for the next Commission, definitely we need to look on how we can keep industrial production here in Europe, also linked to that strategic autonomy. I know we cannot do everything, but there are some important sectors that we need to keep here. Also the food production will be important, so it will be about strategic, it will be about industrial deal and an agricultural deal that we need to work on. And in that sense, well, actually the topics are already mentioned, and that's also the topics that we will discuss during our informal ECOFIN meeting at the end of this month in Ghent. We will look on how can we enhance our competitiveness, how can we look and look at the external aspects, the way how we can de-risk from China and others. What we see, for example, is that we as Europe also are using always the stick. We are using the regulations, also mentioned already before, while other continents are, and especially US, are using the carrots. They are subsidizing everything and sectors. So we need to look how can we bring that back in balance and indeed deregulate is maybe the wrong word, but bringing the regulations a little bit more down and more in line with what the industry is also expecting to actually see that competition and that competitiveness enhance. I see also another important discussion that we will have, and it's already mentioned, is what are we going to do with the strategic role of the biggest multilateral investment bank, the EIB, and how are we going to use them to enhance that competitiveness as well. I think that we should think about and evaluate the procedures. I think that we should think about how can we actually hope that that the link with the private investors, that there is, well, they are a little bit more risk-taking in some projects, but also looking in what strategic sectors we need to invest. Also linked, of course, with the investments in the reconstruction of Ukraine. And then finally, an important one, Capital Markets Union. I always like to add to that, we're always talking of Capital Markets Union, we're talking about the private investors and institutional investors. I also see a huge lever in the citizen savings. These savings also need to be used to actually and incentivize them in investing. I can just say we had a state bond in Belgium last summer, which was extremely popular. What we saw there was that the financial literacy of our citizens was actually very low. It's also seen in different researches indicating, well, half of the citizens actually do not have a good understanding of financial literacy, of how to invest and so on. So I really believe that there we also have an important role to play, and that's a discussion that we will also have together with Mayred to see how we can also use these citizens' savings actually also to use in the challenges that we face at European level and to invest in these important projects.
So we speak a lot about the investing gap in the EU for the transition, energy transition, and also for clean and deep tech. Merit McGuinness, unlocking private financing also requires making the investment environment more conducive, for instance, by reducing red tape and also administrative burden, and also by harmonizing rules at EU level. How do we make sure that competitiveness and sustainability really actually work together as a priority? You mentioned it already before, but how do we really make sure that it is also perceived as such on the market?
I think the mood has changed in the last 18 months. I don't think anyone is resiling from the green and digital transition, but certainly the idea of competitive Europe is really top of the agenda, and they're not inconsistent one with the other. I think the issue of regulation needs careful consideration. I don't think anyone in this room likes or wants red tape, but I'm sure if before the financial crisis we had the wisdom we developed after it and had in place proper rules, we would be wealthier now. So we should learn from that, not to talk about deregulation, but I would like the next Commission to focus now, particularly in the financial area, because I realize we have given a lot of work to the member states to do. We should do much less. We should look at implementation. We should see where the gaps are and find ways of changing effectively so that we don't overburden either the member states or the businesses with red tape or bureaucracy. I think now is a time to talk, yes, about what we've achieved, and sometimes we don't do that, but I'm a great believer in sometimes eaten bread is soon forgotten. So it's also good to look at where we could do better and how we need public support for that. And I think that if you can say very clearly to citizens, Europe's loss, in my view, was in the 70s when there were oil crisis. I'm sure my colleague to my right has no knowledge, but I have. So I would say, had we had the wisdom, all of us collectively, of Denmark, to keep investing in renewables decades ago, we would not be in quite the immediate crux we are. We would not be over-reliant as we found ourselves on a very unreliable partner. So I don't think there's anyone saying we don't want to invest in renewables. I think we have to find out what are the delays. There are practical delays. There is money there, but I think what investors need, whether you're large or small, is predictability and clarity, and that there is an environment, a political drive to make sure that our economies, and I think the Polish example is a very clear one, because coal, of course, is not what you want to be using, but you have to have a lot of investment to get away from coal. But think of the benefits to both the environment and the climate agenda when you do that. And it's not a case of if, it's an absolute case of when. And I think that the illegal, the horrible invasion by Russia into Ukraine, has maybe made us less naive, I hope. Not everyone globally loves the European Union in the way that we might think they should. And therefore, I think we have to be very pragmatic. We have to toughen up a little on many areas, and that's been addressed. We talk about being leaders, and we are. But I think sometimes a bit of humility is also required to see what others are doing and to see, can we learn from others? And I think there's certainly been that learning in the last while. So a very different agenda will face the incoming Commission. But I think to go back, and I'll finish on this, Pierre, to your very good point about what are our achievements and when is Europe really important? COVID was a case study. I wish we hadn't had to have a pandemic. I came in during it into the college, and it was quite a lonely experience not seeing or being with people. But actually, when member states realized that they could not get their hands on anything that was necessary because of competition between us, they turned to Europe and said, we need to work together better. And we did. So I think that Europe's strength sometimes comes when there is this sense that separately we're going to fail. And I think on financing, on mobilizing capital, on capital markets union and banking union, we can't afford to fail. And I don't think we should really want that 5 years after, so the next commission, that we don't complete these projects and modernize them as well. The world of banking and finance is changing before our eyes. Digitalization is enormously impactful. Very final remark. I mean, I hear the call and hear very clearly on the defense sector and investment. You know, one of the biggest worries I have is a cyber attack, which isn't about bullets or tanks, but a cyber attack on our financial sector, on the industry, would be catastrophic. And really, I think we also need to talk about investment in this. It's invisible in a sense until it hits. And you can imagine the societal impacts of a really impactful event. Thank you, Vincent, for mentioning financial literacy. It's dear to our hearts, and we will improve society by by having citizens that know, understand, and feel in control of their finances and invest. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrzej Domański, you have, before becoming finance minister, you have gained a lot of experience as a fund manager. From a practical point of view, what would you recommend as the main actions to be taken at the EU level to mobilize private financing to support the EU green and industrial transition? So what could we do?
Sure, right. Actually, I was working many years as a fund manager, so I was really glad to see the market reaction for the political change that took place in Poland. The equity went up, spreads went versus, for example, bonds went down, yields on Polish bonds went down. So it's all very positive. But of course, this is just a market reaction, and we all need to create an environment, stable business environment, and a stable legal framework for investors. We starting that job in Poland. Of course, the EU regulation are absolutely crucial. And what both Vincent and Ms. Commissioner said about actually turning or converting citizens' savings into efficient investments. This is one of very important goal for the new government in Poland. We know it's not easy, and lots of education has to be done to convince people to invest their money a bit more efficient. What we want to do in Poland, for example, is make the legal environment way more stable. For example, by extending the vacatio legis for new acts, so that investor can really feel safe when investing while investing their money. There's of course a lot of discussion about regulation, red tape, and I couldn't agree more with what Mr. Prime Minister of Luxembourg has said a moment ago. A lot of regulations went too far, and they are destroying at some areas the competitiveness of our European economy. So we have to look one by one and choosing some wise deregulation actions. And the new government of Poland will be really willing to cooperate in this area.
Pierre Gramegna, the ESM is an institution responsible, as you said it before, for safeguarding financial stability in the euro area. In your view, what is the potential impact of climate change on financial stability? Does Europe have the necessary resources and tools to ensure financial stability in light of climate risks that are likely to intensify in the coming years?
Yes, thank you. I think it is good that we have a few minutes also to focus again on climate change, because it's an issue that's going to be there to stay for decades, if not forever. I think it is also our role as ESM in anticipating what could have an impact on financial stability, to also see how could we tackle a few challenges. And that will give me the opportunity to really build on the regulatory framework that the EU Commission has put into place, this famous taxonomy, where Europe was a pioneer and hat off for that. And now, if you are nasty, you say that's typically European. You first regulate and then you wonder how it works. We Americans do it differently. Now, they have done it differently in the sense that they have, with the Inflation Reduction Act, thrown a lot of money into it. The good thing in that, in the American approach, is that now they take climate change seriously themselves. So we should rebound. It's a communication issue. We should rebound and say the Americans are finally recognizing that we were right and that we have to do something on regulation. What we are doing is we're complaining they're subsidizing, which is also good. But there's the two aspects to it. But I want to say about taxonomy is that also there it is being implemented and it needs to be continuously updated. So it's not about deregulation, and I'm sad you were so shocked about my word, Mairead, because we get along so well. I wouldn't like to go away here from Luxembourg and be shocked. So that would not be good. No, update regulation and make it such that we can deliver. That's exactly what we need to do. So I have two things I would like to say. One is that we have taken inspiration from the backstop for the Single Resolution Fund, backstop meaning a kind of safety net that is alimented by contribution of the financial sector. And we think there could be an initiative to do something similar for the insurance sector in order to cover the protection gap that exists to protect against climate change risks. Because that costs a fortune, and most private companies, insurance companies, say we cannot cover that. No, that's the private sector answering, I cannot do it. The public sector saying you should do it. So we should meet somewhere in the middle. So having a kind of reinsurance fund that is funded step by the sector itself, if necessary, some guarantees from the public sector, from countries on top of this. So it just tells you that by having a constructive private-public approach on this, we might have tools and develop tools that do not exist yet. So my wonderful team at ESM that I have inherited wrote a blog on that and is deepening that. I would like to say a second thing, brings me also back to deregulation, which is the issue, and I look at Andrzej, of the issue of stranded assets. The stranded assets, for those who are not, what it means is that an asset that is worth 100, a coal plant, maybe in 5 years, that asset is worth 10, because nobody wants to hold these shares anymore, nobody wants to work with that company anymore. So from one day to another, very quickly, you have an issue there. How to cope with that? Now, one way to cope with that is to have a transition, and one way to cope by that is to force the financial sector, and in particular banks, to have a framework that allows them to reduce their investment in that step by step. So we need regulation. The European Central Bank is working on it, and I'm sure Europeans and the European Central Bank is going to be the first one to come out with it. But you see, regulation can help you solve problems. So in summary, what I want to remember from this discussion about regulation is one needs to modernize, update regulation, use regulation in such a way that it guides the economy in the right direction, and last but not least, have a regulation that helps crowd in the private sector.
Okay, you just mentioned the ESM backstop. How would that help to strengthen the stability of Europe's banking system?
Oh, it's very simple. The Single Resolution Fund has accumulated 80 billion euro. and 80 billion euro, which have been collected over several years. And we have earmarked at the ESM 68 billion euro additional to these 80 in case the Single Resolution Fund itself is depleted. So this is in a way a very efficient way, also in a way public-private, because the ESM is funded by countries, and giving this additional guarantee is, I think, an excellent example.
Ms. McGuinness, you wanted to react to something that...
Yeah, just to reassure Pierre that we are still friends. And I want to thank you for mentioning taxonomy, because we have a sustainable finance framework. Frankly, if we could have done our work without a framework, if the market had delivered, it would be better, but we didn't have any move in the market. So investors wanted clarity about what is sustainable. They want transparency data from companies. But I want to reassure this audience and the wider community that we have been very proportionate about this. Because when we looked at the standards in terms of what companies had to do, the asks of companies, I cut back quite a lot, because I don't want resistance, I want cooperation, and I want results. Yes, the taxonomy is a work in progress. It will have to be modernized, and mining needs to go into this taxonomy. There are tricky issues to deal with, but it has to be done. Quickly then, a challenge maybe to our member states, because we are looking at cutting red tape where it's appropriate, finding those places where it's overdone. We need also member states to do that, because very often there is gold plating, and therefore this is a collective effort that we have to achieve together rather than against each other. Also, I hope that there isn't a sense in which it's all the fault of regulation, because we do show great leadership in Europe on regulation. We can overdo it, and we can change, you know, and do things better. And that's always, I think, something that the Commission, as far as I'm concerned, is very aware of. However, when it comes to sustainability and you know, getting private money to go in the direction of economically sustainable and environmentally sustainable projects, we needed more regulation in this case. But rest assured, I was conscious to make sure that it helped companies, including SMEs, and helped investors. But maybe there's a need for a box at the back of the room so that everyone in this audience who has an issue with the piece of legislation would just put in a little note to self or me, and then I will go through them. Because very often when people say too much regulation, it's your fault and whatever, I say, which piece and where? And I'm willing to change, no better woman. I was a politician after all, so I'm not sure if there's a box there. I could provide one though. Thank you.
Yeah, we have also our app, and I think you can also put your ideas in there. Well, we've spoken. There's really a broad consensus when it comes to the key role of investment in the European public goods in strategic areas to really relaunch the EU competitiveness. How can we, it's a question again to all of you in this panel, how can we foster better partnerships between the public and the private sector to mobilize enough resources and capacities to really dynamize investments in the EU? What other options are there on the table that we haven't spoken or touched upon until now?
Well, it's about, of course, the integration of the capital markets union, which will be an integrated capital markets will be important. And again, and I already mentioned it, I think there's a huge role to play for the EIB as well. I really believe that they can incentivize private investors to actually also take the step to invest. We still know what lever the Juncker fund had back in the days. There was €1. I don't know if Europe was investing €1. I don't know what it was, 18 or 17 euros that were actually invested by private investors. I think the bank has a similar role to play, and I think they definitely do. Is the InvestEU program that is actually where they, of course, also part of that plays that role, and that has that unique opportunity, but also that important responsibility to do that, because and that's already mentioned before. We cannot do it alone with governments. We cannot do it alone with Europe. We need these private investors also to invest. And a role that the EIB can play there, and I already mentioned it, is that quality stamp. If people see the EIB logo on the support of a certain project, I'm sure that private investors are also will take their responsibility to make their efforts.
Pierre Gramegna.
Well, I think a lot has been said. I think this multiplier effect that you have with the EIB, one could think of additional ideas to develop formulas between private sector and public or semi-public to leverage more on it, which is not something that other areas of the world do as much as we do. I've spent my first year in office to visit the 20 countries of the Euro area, and let's face it, we will have quite a few lack of financing at the end of 2026 when the NGEU program runs out. So we will need to use what we have in a very smart way. And in fact, in my country visits, quite a few governments suggested that we should use the firepower of the ESM maybe in a wider way. Now, we are constrained by the treaties, so we cannot, the ESM is not there to invest into projects. But in the same way as we have committed to be an additional guarantee for the Single Resolution Fund, one should have imagination in how we can use smartly that firepower without becoming at all, and that's not at all what I'm saying, a multilateral development bank. Many countries I visited told me, what can you do in Ukraine as ESM? Well, I said, we cannot do anything in Ukraine. Our area of competence is the ESM. That means the 20 countries that have the euro. But if countries have financial difficulties or are about to lose access to financial markets because of the war in Ukraine, well, we need to look into, in the remit, in the existing treaty, how we can do that. So I think what is also interesting is that, maybe if I stay one more minute with the ESM was created to be a stabilizing factor, a lender of last resort for countries that lose access to the financial market. Yes, and all the cases that happened were because there were bank failures and there were issues of public finances. So that's what we have in our mind in terms of when the ESM plays a role. But in the context of the pandemic, the ESM also proposed an instrument, and now in the context of the war in Ukraine, which is hitting all of us, which can create risks for all of us, for quite a few countries at the same time, for a reason that is not of their own making. Well, eventually, that's also why we are there. So I think it's interesting to realize that it was done for something, for concrete cases we had in mind, and I think the treaty allows for looking at all risks, and in particular get away eventually from the idea that a country or countries that eventually need the support of the ESM have done something wrong.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of this first panel. A lot has been said. I've been taking notes, and I will try to come up with the main conclusions that I've written down. Mr. Gramegna, you said making us more competitive will not be easy. And something that is very important in the future, especially regarding the upcoming European elections. Mrs. McGuinness, you said that we really need to stress what we have achieved in the European Union and all the progress that has been made. Regarding regulation, we shouldn't be using a stick, and we shouldn't overburden neither the citizens nor the companies. You also stress the fact that we need to update and modernize our regulations. We need also, for the future, we need an industrial deal alongside the Green Deal, maybe even an agricultural deal along with the industrial deal. We also need to boost the European single market in order to have everybody on board in terms of investment. We need to focus on financial literacy that needs to be enhanced so that we can really, as you said, Mr. Domański, we need to turn savings into investments. And for the investors in general, they need more stability and predictability. We have to, in general, tough up as leaders. And we should, in Europe, not only rely on a crisis mode to function and excel at what we do. And regarding the future challenges that are ahead, we need to invest also in defense and cyber security. If you, dear audience, have other ideas, please use our forum app to put those ideas in. And this is it for the first part of the second edition of the EIB Forum. You are now invited to a networking lunch. And please return to this room or be in front of your screens in about one time. We will start at 1:45 sharp with the keynote speech that will be given by President Calvino. Thank you very much.